When we're talking about studying Romans 9 and 11, we're not going to study Romans 9 and 11 this morning. This is another one of the lessons like Wednesday where we talk about what you have to do to study, what you have to tell your mind is happening. And it's, we went through several different things last week that are totally different than what we're talking about this morning, in the sense of sometimes when you're reading, you have to tell yourself, I have got to go to these passages. If you have center reference Bibles, and if you don't, you need one, or you need a reference Bible of some sort, and you have to. You just absolutely, especially if Paul says, David said, if Paul says, Elijah said, if Paul says, Hosea said, you got to go there. And if you don't, you're robbing yourself. And in this particular context, it is to me the most profound passages in the Bible, the culmination of Paul's work having to do with grace and mercy and us not actually being subject to the law, and the law not being the means by which we're saved. Now, I meant to have up the terrible bulletin article that I showed last week, where the preacher where Jeremy goes actually said, when you sin, you need to feel worthless. And it's just, so in that context, that's why I say that we're really concerned about our friends, and some of you are actually involved with those friends as well in a more intimate way than others, so they could be in your homes. So 1 Kings 21:28. Why would I start my lesson on Romans 9 and 11? Just let's look into them. It's not really a study. Why would I start that with 1 Kings 21:28? And the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, now, I don't know what you do when you see Ahab, but when I see Ahab, I say, one of, if not the most wicked kings in the Bible. I mean, this dude was rough, and his wife was rougher, Jezebel. But look at this. We have brethren who absolutely will not give, they won't give mercy to Samson. And y'all, Samson is actually recorded in Hebrews chapter 11 in the record of the faithful that they wanted us to remember. By faith this, by faith that, and by faith Samson. They don't want to even give room to Samson, much less if you bring up Ahab in that kind of context, you are a heretic. Well, God is the one who's speaking here. Seest thou how Ahab humbled himself before me? Because he humbled himself before me, I will not bring the evil in his days, but in his son's days will I bring evil upon his house. How would you like it if you absolutely knew that your offspring were, let's just say your offspring or your in-laws or your parents were involved in some kind of horrendous scheme, trouble, situation, and you're just praying, and you're wondering if it's all going to come to a head, and people are going to know, people are going to go to jail, it's all going to be out, and as a result of something you did in front of God, he moved that 4 generations. Do we think like that? I don't think people think like that. Last week we actually saw where the king of Babylon was being told, if you'll stop being so rough on the poor and start extending mercy, then I'm going to change the outcome. And did he do it? No. Next thing you know, he's lost his mind, literally, and has to be taught that lesson. It's something like just that simple. Well, why bring this up? There it is. When you start getting into this section, the amount of information that is like pulled in, and when you see it, y'all, when you see it being pulled in, this is a demand from God. It is at the point, it's like when I don't think I know, we all know this. It's like when you get a new phone or a new operating system. and the icons change, and if you're going to use that phone, you just have to just go ahead, and your brain has to burn through it, has to wrestle with it in order to make the phone calls or whatever. Mine reset the other day, and I cannot find my calculator to save my life. On the fly. Can't find my clock, and so it's driving me crazy. So look at this. God hath not cast away his people which he foreknew. Know you not what the scripture saith of Elijah, how he maketh intercession to God against Israel, saying, Lord, they have killed thy prophets and digged down thy altars, and I am left alone, and they seek my life. But what saith the answer of God unto him? I have reserved to myself 7,000 men which have not bowed the knee to the image of Baal. This is the exact context. And he brings that up to basically make this statement. You may think that I'm done with the work that I'm involved in, like maybe Elijah was wanting God at this point to avenge all of the prophets, all of the persons that died, and all of the evil that they had done. But God reminds him, no, I actually have 7,000 men who have not bowed to the image Baal. Well, what does that have to do with Romans chapter 11? It's the same thing. Individuals in Romans 11 are in the process. One group of individuals are finding salvation. Another group of individuals are trying to keep it from them. And as they discuss how we're going to get together, I mean, you know who that is. Gentiles are finding it, the Jews are rejecting it, and the Jews are trying to create as much havoc and demanding that Paul actually not say these kinds of things. And this is the context. You end up seeing that Paul would be learning, I suppose, that God has some individuals that are not where he may think they are, but for sure, Paul is telling them that God is telling y'all, I have another plan for the Jews. And what is that? That's mercy. That's God telling them about his mercy, and he brings it out of the context of the account of Ahab. So, Romans chapter 9, verse 30. What shall we say then? That the Gentiles which follow not after righteousness have attained to righteousness, even the righteousness which is of faith. But Israel, which followed after the law of righteousness, hath not attained to the law of righteousness. Wherefore? Why? Because they sought it not by faith, but as it were by the works of the law, for they stumbled at the stumbling stone. As it is written, Behold, I lay in Zion a stumbling stone and a rock of offense, and whosoever believeth on him shall not be ashamed. Now, y'all, this is the same exact idea. I have 7,000 who have not bowed the knee. I am not going to forget Israel, but I am telling you why why the Jews are having a problem right now, and why the Gentiles are actually coming towards the gospel. It's because of this stumbling block, them thinking that the law is what saved them, as opposed to not trusting that it is God saving them. Now, Romans 11:7. Now, I did say, y'all, we're not studying this. It's not like we're going to pull out all the meanings. What I'm trying to do, I'm trying to impress on your mind the scope of information that you, as a Bible student, as a person who is reading the pinnacle of the explanation of why God can be so merciful, so gracious, so forgiving, and that he has worked out a plan that actually helps everybody. And you might say, well, why didn't he make it easier? Well, making it easy is a relative term, isn't it? How long have we been Christians, as we think? So Some of us have been Christians for 5 years. Some of us have been Christians for 10 years. Some for 15, some for 20, some for 25, 30. How much time does it take to actually study this out? Well, if your life depended on it, how much time would it take? Well, your soul does depend on it. Our offspring's soul, our families, everybody around us, it really does depend on being able, literally, y'all. Could you operate on the level that Caleb was operating on Sunday? Can I break this down for you right quick when we talked about it? I don't know if he was asking me for my advice or not. I was giving it. I was saying, so Caleb, when you think about this debate, it's just 3 10-minute speeches. Get it? I mean, a debate ends up being 3 10-minute speeches, and he gets 3 10-minute speeches over there, and then y'all ask some questions back and forth. I mean, you think you couldn't speak for 30 minutes? You couldn't have a session with a neighbor, a friend, a loved one, where you just said, would you give me 5 10 minutes and just let me say this, and then whatever they get to say back or whatever, it's probably not going to happen that they're going to say very much. But all you'd have to do is arrange possibly 20 minutes and break it up into 5s. You can do this. What then? Israel hath not obtained that which they seek for. Why did I pick 7? Romans 11:7. Because that's what Romans 9 ends with. What shall we say then? What then? Do you see that? That's a lot of verses in between there, but that's the last thing that was said as he then picked up chapter 10. What shall we say then? That the Gentiles which followed not after righteousness have attained to righteousness, even the righteousness which is of faith? Well, what then? Romans 11. Israel hath not obtained which they seek. Did he not just say that? But Israel which followeth after the law of righteousness hath not attained the law of righteousness. He's going over the same information, but in the interim, you have chapter 10, and he's expecting that you could keep your mind, all of us to keep our mind focused through chapter 10, even if we didn't understand it. I promise that if we go to the references, it will start to make some sense. But if we just keep reading this year after year after year, and so here was my point about my little speech at the beginning. When we're studying with these different denominational people on different denominational subjects, we don't run the references necessarily, because these are our proof texts without the references necessarily. So we could literally spend 20 years in these passages and never even realize, what's he really saying here? What then? Israel hath not obtained that which he seeketh, but the election hath obtained it, and the rest are blinded. What you say? Elected? Romans 11:2. What saith the answer of God unto them? I have reserved myself 7,000 men. In the time frame where the king himself, who you might think is going to be disposed of, humbled himself, and he's going to move the destruction 4 generations. See how we got right back to that? But the election hath obtained it, and the rest were blinded. According as it is written, God hath given them the spirit of slumber, eyes that they should not see, and ears that they should not hear unto this day. And David saith, are you ready for this? And David saith, and a stumbling block and a recompense unto them. Did we hear that somewhere just a minute ago? Behold, I lay in Zion a stumbling block and a rock of offense. Whosoever believeth on him shall not be ashamed. That's what is said in the prophets, but this is David saying it. And so here's my point just this minute. How many references? The time frame of Ahab, and recognize what I can remember seeing this. This was in Danville when we were going through the Kings. My go-to for God being gracious was Manasseh. I mean, Manasseh was a wicked king, and he was passing his children through the altar to the gods and burning them. And God forgave him. That was my go-to. And then, as we're studying that, I read this, and it's like moving all of this 4 generations. And so we've got a reference to Ahab, which goes along with Elijah. We have the elect associated with the 7,000 that have not bowed their knee. We have a prophet that I didn't bother to look up in Romans chapter 9. And we're talking about the righteousness which is of faith, which is extremely important. And y'all, all this is going to come back to that guy that was texting me in just a minute. So now we have put David into it, and we've connected Romans 11:7 back to Romans 9, verse 30. And it's just like, if you know this going in, like if you were to go home and say, I got this laid out in front of me, I think I'm going to be able to grasp it. I may have to get 2 Bibles so that I can keep both chapters open at the same time. Jeremiah 18:3. Then I went down to the potter's house, and behold, he wrought a work on the wheels, and the vessel that he made of clay was marred in the hand of the potter. So he made it again, another vessel, as seemed good to the potter to make it. Then the word of the Lord came to me, saying, O house of Israel, cannot I do with you as the potter, saith the Lord? Behold, as the clay is in the potter's hand, so are you in mine hand, O house of Israel. Romans 9:21. Hath not the potter power over the clay of the same lump to make one vessel unto honor and another unto dishonor? Man, we're all over the place, aren't we? I mean, if we weren't doing it this way, and it was like another kind of sermon, and all these passages would be being flung from there and slung from here, you'd be saying, what in the world? But you're seeing all of them right together. And in the context, is it not like, are you not seeing, okay, if God wants to reform Israel and bring in the Gentiles, who are they to question that God is for the moment seemingly rejecting Israel while he actually forms them? Who said that? Romans 9, verse 21. The more I would know about Jeremiah 18 and what was going on in that time frame, it's disciplinary. Now, y'all, this is what blows my mind. And it's new to me. It's not new in the sense of information. It's new in the sense of application. I want the people that I'm worried about fixed, and I want them fixed right now. So here's the question. If a family member, any person, but I want to make this a family member makes a choice to be obstinate. And in his obstinacy or her obstinacy, and we know people on both of these spectrums that we could bring up if we wanted to. You bring it up in your mind. I'm thinking about particulars. What if, in order for a greater impression and a more extensive statement to other loved ones and people that are involved, God stretched out the time frame of their change for 25 years? Could you be patient? Could you think about God's forbearance? It's not over. Could you be patient if the change of that one individual were going to affect 20 of your other family members? Could you think that God is in fact doing that and have faith in him that ultimately he is trying to work a plan in a way that is so far, the result's so far beyond what you would have done or I would have done if I could have wanded it, just, touched, give me 3 different people that I can touch, and I'll do this. You know, this is a window of 30 to 40 years that is being played out. And at the end of it, it's going to be avenging. And you all know this, the Jewish system is going to be dismantled and completely destroyed. And there's going to be a lot of flack and residual hurt. But when you think about, and when you see that, it's all about mercy. Okay. Let me let you look at, again, we're doing the same thing. Look at the array of biblical accounts that are being played out in front of you, and a person, let's just say, how much do you know about Hosea? There he is, 925. How much do you really know about this, would you say, Caleb, you can just shake or nod, this is one of the pivotal places that Jeremiah would have loved to center on? 13, Romans 9:13. Man, they love that passage, and guess what? They don't have a clue. Romans 9:9, for this is the word of promise. At this time I will come, and Sarah shall have a son. And it's like, really? I have to amass all of these players. You ever seen one of those movies where they have the computer capability of like, he just kind of, a guy in one of the agencies, CIA or whatever, he can take what's on the computer screen, he does this number here, and it just flies up, and he does it over here, and before you know it, you can see all of DC or all of London, whatever it happened to be. Can you just imagine this array? Someone's like, I don't think I have, that's some Hollywood. Is it really? Hebrews 12:1, we have a cloud of witnesses. Have you ever just, said to yourself, I need to array all of them in front of myself at a particular time if God says so, and I need to know what's going on with each one of them. Sarah, Romans 9:12, it was said unto her, that would be Rebecca. Would it be Rebecca? Rachel. Rebecca. Rebecca has Isaac and Jacob. Jacob and Esau. The elder shall serve the younger. As it is written, Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated. And then he brings in Hosea, as he saith also in Hosea, I will call them my people which were not my people, and her beloved which was not beloved. They're supposed to know that people that they are not thinking about, let's say for instance, Esau's relatives. Is it the case that God doesn't plan to save the descendants of Esau? This is simply talking about nations being against each other in a overall storyline, and God telling them beforehand so that you basically, when they're seeing it, they're not surprised. This is what God said. Romans 9:17, for the scripture saith unto Pharaoh. Pharaoh? Do you realize how many years between Jacob and Esau Pharaoh is? Y'all, we're stretching this particular Pharaoh, the one with the plagues. This is the fourth generation from the time frame of Abraham and these family members. And yet this is found in the exact same context. Talk about the cloud of witnesses. Could Pharaoh have been in the cloud of witnesses? Absolutely he could have. If he would have responded like the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, if he would have hearkened to the things that were happening. He says, I might show my power in thee, and that my name might be declared throughout all the earth. Now, that's what I was alluding to a moment ago when I said the way God does things, if we can be patient, if we can recognize that he is working on a plan, we're playing our part to humble ourselves like Ahab so that maybe certain things are deferred, bad things are deferred. Hopefully the end will be good, but it's possible that something you're doing and because you're not becoming overwhelmed, you're seeing that God's forbearance is a extended tool, and at the end of it, it ends up being, do you know this person, that person, this person, that person? They're the reason why all of this happened, and it doesn't just reach here. It reaches wherever your relatives, wherever your loved ones. And y'all, in reality, that's what we're doing. You as a congregation, we as a congregation, and the two of us and our producers, it's new people all the time. And then Romans 9:14, what shall we say then? Is there unrighteousness of God? God forbid. For he saith to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. Now we're outside of Egypt, and it's just like, if you didn't get all of that, I wouldn't be surprised. But I think you did get the fact that all of these people are being arrayed in these 2 chapters. Therefore hath he mercy on whom he will have mercy, and on whom he will he hardeneth. I so want God to have mercy on these individuals, and I so want to stop individuals that are bothering men like this. I probably don't have this in order, so you remember the gentleman saying, I have never resolved myself to be free from sin? I reminded him of this text. I said, you once sent me a text sent to me in which you said you never resolve yourself to be free from sin and struggles. Free in the New Testament in many contexts is the law term exempt. Romans 8:2. The phrase is a term that refers to a system of law of sin and death. We're exempt from you sin, you die. And to be finished, I'm just going to move along. I began to talk to him about different scriptures, and this is what he said to me, and I want you to notice the timestamp right quick as well. 12:58 is what that one said. This started at 9. Watching your program last night seems you're promoting grace more than maybe you have in the past. I could be wrong about that. It seems the fact that you believe most any sin can be forgiven, and that people also can continue in sin, at least at times. I sent him back, here is what you asked me. It seems, in fact, you believe most any sin can be forgiven, and that people also continue to sin, at least at times. I said, do you realize where your question is quoted in the New Testament? He had no idea what he had just said. He had actually just said what they said to Paul, after Paul said what he said in Romans chapter 5 about much more grace where sin abounds, where law is added and you find out more things that are wrong and there are mistakes that you make, much more grace abounds. And then he ended up asking the same question. It seems like, Johnny, that you believe most any sin can be forgiven. You know, I'm just thinking. He said, John, maybe somewhere. Have you ever heard of a passage that says, there is a sin unto death? I say pray for that. But there's a sin there is a sin not unto death. I say to pray for that. So if there is the fact that there are sins that are not unto death, then yes, why would I not actually believe that most any sin can be forgiven, and that you have to figure out, and that is going to be one of his next questions if it's not right there, which one at which time? And so 10:17, I'm not going to belabor all this. I'm just saying these are the kinds of things that he ended up saying. I've never embraced grace because I felt that overwhelming condemnation and guilt, reasonably so for my sins, which then caused me to have an, oh well, I can't make it anyway attitude. And I continued in sin for years. If you were under a preacher that put in the bulletin, every time you sin, you're worthless, would you not end up feeling like this? 10:17, and finally 1:31. I think that's the last one that he said. So, can I tell you what this guy did? He thanked me, and he said, would you give me your PayPal address? And I said, sure. Gave him a PayPal address. He spent from 9 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. with me yesterday, and he sent me $150 for my time. Boy, that's something, isn't it? Someone calling up a preacher and getting his questions, or at least trying to, and then sending, and he's done the same thing for Caleb. It's just like, y'all, we are affecting these people. And my encouragement is just another one of these. Try to bring these thoughts to bear when you come into these passages, that you just can't just breeze through them and not give them the attention and look for the details.